Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back for some pan action. We are talking about panning palettes. So this is my second sort of project pan product of the year that I'm doing. I am panning 4 palettes, 2 face palettes, 2 eye palettes, and I'm going to do a quick check-in on how I'm going with it. If you wanted to see how my project pan's going, that was my last video that should have been up yesterday or the day before. I'm running late because I filmed these last week and I didn't lose the footage, but my audio didn't record because my microphone battery had gone and I didn't know. So I wasted my time and I'm refilming them and it's frustrating, but I do have some progress. So let's talk about it. All right, let's start with the palette I'm making least progress on, and it's my Mercier Fall in Love Face Illuminator collection. This is, oh my God. Something just happened, crew. So when I opened it, this happened. Can you see this? Can you see that this, can you see what happened here? It just plopped out. Let's just plop that back in, shall we? All right, so I almost hit pan on that accidentally, sort of. So this guy's now loose. What do I think about that? Clearly, I've learnt from this that these aren't that, they're not a baked formula. They sort of feel like they're baked, but these highlighters are that, I think they call them like gelée sort of products. These, you see this formula with a lot of brands. Too Faced do them, Benefit do them with some of their box blushes. They're like a jelly formula that dries down to a powder. That's how it sort of, they form it. They need that sort of cross-hash base to stick to, otherwise they can fall out. And that is a common problem with this type of formula, is that they can just fall out because they're not pressed firmly into a metal pan because they're too solid for that. They sort of just fall out like a little dry biscuit if they were just in a smooth pan. So they do need to grip to something, but you can find they can fall out. And yeah, I've got eyeshadows that have done this. I've got other highlighters that have done this. So this is not unusual, but it just means I need to be very careful with this because this is currently loose. Like if I actually do put it upside down, it falls out. So it's still usable, but it's something like I can't repress this because it's got that mesh base. This can't be just repressed in a pan. So I just have to be mindful of that. So that's a bit frustrating. It's the color I get least progress on anyway, because it's clearly a dark bronze and this is a highlighter palette. Dark bronze isn't a highlighting shade for me. I have used this as an eyeshadow before. I have used it in the past month as an eyeshadow. It is a very pretty shade, but because I'm working on panning some palettes, it is one that I am not exclusively using as an eyeshadow. I'm sure if I was like, look, get rid of the palette, the eyeshadow palettes, and let's just focus on this palette for the year, I could probably get some good usage out of that just simply by using it as an eyeshadow, but I'm not doing that at the moment, but it is a pretty eyeshadow. So I'll have photos on the screen of where it's at now versus last month. Now I think the main progress I've seen is with the first shade. Some of the texture, so that sort of silk, wavy silk design in the pan has gone from that shade, and it is looking a little bit more just flat. The gold is also at the same stage. I have noticed that one issue that I have with this formula is that it can seal. So what I tend to do when I'm lazy is I will use a brush to powder my face. So I've put my foundation on, I've got a brush for powder, put it on, then I pick up with the same brush a bit of bronzer, put it on, bit of blush, put it on, and then I use the same brush to pick up the highlighter to put it on. And if there's any sort of wetness, any small residual wetness from setting the foundation, this can seal over. So I have had in the past month, I've had to sort of scrape off the top layer because there's been little chunks of sealed up pan. So that's mainly, I've had the issue with these 2 shades because that's the ones I use the most. But yeah, that's something I've just observed. Now, judging on this pan here and how thick it is when you take it out, it's pretty thick. So it is like, so this is a lot thicker than like a thick coin. So if you've got any thick coins in your currency, This is thicker. I'm thinking our thickest one in Australia is the $2 coin. This is a lot thicker than the $2 coin. So there's a lot of product here. So I feel like when you look at just the design sort of taken down, there's still a lot to go. I feel like I'm going to take all year to probably hit pan on these two alone. So I'm probably not going to stress too much about the bottom two. I'm just going to work on the top two and see how we go with that. The next face palette that I have is the Smashbox Crush on Blush palette. I am getting some, oh fuck man, we're having a bad day with these, aren't we? So I've got a little nick in the corner. To be fair, I probably will blame my baby for knocking these off my desk before. Probably what broke them. Last month I hit pan on the highlighter and the bronzer, and I still obviously have pan on them, but the pan is getting a bit bigger, and now I've got a little ding taken out of the corner of the highlighter. There'll be photos on the screen, but you can see the comparison. It's growing a bit. I am using it. The progress is nothing to write home about. It's not that exciting, but I am still making the pans bigger. The only blush I've pretty much used in the last month is this one here, and I'm not sure if you can see from the photos. I'll try to capture it, but there is a dip in the side. So just where I naturally put my brush, it's in this sort of top corner here, so that's where I'm starting to see a bit of a dip. So when I hit pan, it will be in that corner there. But these blushes are really pigmented. I don't need to use too much of them, otherwise it looks a bit overdone. And there's no way I'm gonna pan this whole palette by the end of the year. I feel like if I can get some good pan on this one and maybe one more shade, probably this one, I'll be happy, but I'll keep going. Let's just hope my eyeshadow palettes aren't broken as well, because that would be shit. All right, I've got a little bit of crumbling on this purple shade, but I don't care. I don't use that shade very often. So this is my Lorac Pro 1 palette. I also am panning the Pro 2. My goal is that each month I want to at least hit pan on one new shade, and that's across the two palettes. So we've got quite a few shades going on. There's 16 shades in each palette, so 32 all up, and you know, I ideally want to hit pan on at least 12 shades across both palettes. The main progress that I've seen this month on this palette is I've hit pan on the cream shade. So I'll have a comparison from last month to this month on the screen, and hopefully you can see that the cream shade, I've got some good pan on it. The mauve shade, I think the pan is getting a little bit bigger, so I did hit pan on this last month. And then some shades of note, light bronze, or the shade that I like to call Lieutenant Bronze, has a really big dip in it. The shade Pewter also has a pretty good dip in it, and Deep Purple has cracked. So that is the little damage that I've currently got. I have not used that in the past month. I did use Slate today for the first time, go me. But I feel like next month, Light Bronze and Pewter are the ones that are gonna probably see most progress. When it comes to the second palette, this is the one that I use more frequently because the tones are just things that I like to reach for more often. Again, I'll have comparison photos on the screen from last month to this month, and we do have a new pan. So light brown, or as I like to call Lieutenant Brown, now has pan, and the pan is fairly good. This is a shade that I can use quite frequently. Buff, I believe the pan has gotten a lot bigger, and Rosé, I think the pan's gotten a bit bigger as well. The next shades that I feel like I'm gonna hit pan on, Mocha, I use really, really frequently. I like to pair this with Nectar. So that's a combination that I like to use on a daily basis these days. And also Cool Grey in the corner. There's quite a nice dip in there as well. The rest are pretty flat, and I'm not seeing heaps of progress on this. Now, my issue with these palettes and why I'm not going to force myself to pan the whole thing, I did explain that I think in my first check-in, I struggle using this because I find that the textures are pretty flat. So there's either matte, or this shimmery formula is a little bit more satin. So it doesn't actually like illuminate the eye too much or add much depth to the eye or an interesting finish. It sort of looks a little bit like matte with a little bit of something. It's not super exciting. It's a little bit bland. I also find that there's very, very frosty shades or very, very dark shades, and I'm the kind of person that likes to use the in-between. So I'm going to try to use as many of these as possible, and then maybe in a couple months' time, I'll working a new palette that has more fun textures and shades, like shimmery shades that I want to use on a daily basis. Because I sort of feel like once I hit pan on Mocha and I use up Rosé and I use some more mattes, I'm not going to actually want to use these palettes too much because the color's just a little bit too smoky and dark and cool toned for what I like to use on a daily basis. So I will look at introducing another palette in the next couple of months, I reckon. All right, that's my check-in with my Pan That palette. We've had a bit of damage, we've had a bit of carnage, but I'll keep going. Yeah, look, panning palettes, it's cool in theory, and you can see some really good results if you use them every single day. Like you can be surprised that one day you're like, I didn't think I was gonna hit pan on that, and then bam, there's pan. But it's also really boring, and I find these palettes in particular, I would love to just be like, yeah, put a matte on and layer this and layer that and layer that. These get really muddy really fast. So I feel like these look best if you just use maybe like 2 shades, maximum 3, because when you start to work in too many shades, they just look really muddy and really boring, and it actually starts looking really ugly the more you try to layer and the more you try to put on. So I'm struggling a little bit with these because I'm losing interest in them and I'm not loving the effects. I feel like, again, if I introduce something that's a little bit more punchy with textures and finishes and whatnot, I might like using these as an accompanying palette, but as my primary palettes, they're kind of bleh. I actually have something in mind that I might be able to pan because it's a travel palette and chances are I'm not traveling anytime soon. So I might include that in with this because those have nice textures and a little bit different colors. So maybe I'll incorporate that next month or the month after, but I'll start playing with it and see how they sort of work well together. Anyway, if you're doing a Pan That palette, I'd love to know what palette you're panning, how you're finding it, what your struggles are, what you're loving about it. Are you seeing good progress? Let me know. I'd like to know. If you got tips on how to use these up, a few people were mentioning using some of the sort of matte shades as like setting powders. I have tried to use some of these light shades, these shimmery shades as highlighters, but they're too frosty on me. And that's, again, my issue with these palettes. They're either really light or really dark. There's not much in between. So the tones are just not really something I go for. Like I could potentially use light bronze as a highlighter. I'm also trying to pan highlighters and blushes. So using these as blushes, bronzes, highlighters sort of takes away the progress from my other palettes. So damned if I do, damned if I don't. But as I wave this around, I've got deep purple flaking all over my desk. So I better close this and move on. Anyway, hopefully you have a great day and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.